Happy Easter.
Today is the great day, the greatest day in the Christian calendar. It is the day which makes all of the days assemble around it. It's the day that makes Christmas make sense, makes incarnation make sense, makes all of the Old Testament make sense, makes all that is to come between Christ's resurrection and the end of time make sense. This is the pivotal day of all days. And sometimes, well, we can make it a little complex. We can make it so deep that maybe we lose ourselves in its depth. I want to try to stick to some basics with you this morning. Just like in education, they talk about the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Forget spelling. I want to talk with you a little bit about the resurrection and the 3 R's then of the resurrection. The first R is recognition. The women went to the tomb that morning anticipating something. They anticipated what I would anticipate if I went today to Rest Haven Cemetery in Lubbock, where we laid my mother to rest recently. You'd expect to see, the grave. Maybe in my mother's case, there might still be some wilted flowers there. I doubt it. Probably all of that's gone away. There's some fresh dirt. The grass still hasn't grown there yet. That will come soon enough. Right? The women went anticipating a gravestone. They anticipated a great gravestone that was capable of being rolled to cover and seal the tomb. They expected that stone would prevent them from entry into the tomb. In fact, they worried about it. They wondered how they would roll the stone away. And yet they encountered something entirely different. They encountered a stone that had already been rolled away. They encountered a tomb that was empty, and they encountered there an angelic presence that told them that Jesus was not to be found there at all, that he was alive, that he was risen. So the first problem that we have in the women coming to the tomb and in us whenever we encounter the idea of resurrection is recognition. Just what has happened here? What has happened that the grave is now empty, that the stone is moved, that Jesus is not present in some physical form in that place? What has happened? How do we recognize the reality of Jesus' resurrection? It is so immense. It is so far beyond our understanding. It is so unexpected that we have a perception problem. Have you ever seen something that you just weren't quite sure you could believe? Did you see Kentucky get beat last night? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That was a different conversation. Tim Keller tells the following story. He says, when my wife was growing up, every summer her family spent 2 weeks at a small compound of cottages on the shores of Lake Erie. Now the cottages are all gone. In fact, that part of the beach is gone. Whenever she visits that childhood vacation spot, she weeps because she knows the beach is irretrievable. That sense of irretrievability is like death. And the older we get, the more we realize that certain losses are irretrievable. They're gone. And that sucks the joy out of our lives. But here's where Christ's resurrection offers something unique. Even religions that promise a kind of a spiritual future or spiritual bliss only offer consolation for what you've lost. But the resurrection of Christ even promises the restoration of what you've lost. You don't just get your body back. You get the body you've always wanted, but you never had. You don't just get your life back. You get the life that you've always wanted, but you've never had. But Jesus Christ is walking proof that you will miss nothing. Nothing. It's all coming in the future. It's going to be unimaginably wonderful. There is no religion, no philosophy, and no human being who can offer this kind of future apart from the resurrected Jesus. And as Christians, our hope for the future is based on the historical fact of the resurrection. So if you're not a Christian, let me ask, why wouldn't you want that? Even if you don't like different aspects of the Christian faith, why would you not want this hope of restoration? You're just not being honest with yourself if you don't want it. But just like Keller's wife, just like all of us, it's difficult for us to think that certain things are possible. It's difficult for us to think that that beach that's been eroded is recoverable. It's difficult for us to think that the relationship that we enjoyed with some loved one that has passed on, that too will be restored one day. It's difficult for me to think that someday I might be able to dunk a basketball. It's difficult for me to think that someday all the tears will be dry, that all the sorrows will be past, that all will be joy in the presence of a resurrected Lord, and that all of our loved ones who have believed in Him, that gather around Him, will rejoice with us as we sing together, as we worship and glorify the one who has restored all to us. Recognition. And then restoration. What the women and the disciples and everyone struggled with in that moment when they did understand that Jesus was not there, that the tomb was empty, was that what had happened was a restoration of life. They had seen Jesus die a horrible death on the cross. They knew that fact. And when you've become acquainted with death, as you do over the years, you just know that that's that. We kind of tend to sometimes put it in a box and put it away. It keeps pouring out of that box. It keeps interrupting our life. We keep on feeling it long after the day has passed. But we know that there's not anything we can do to change it. Death has come. Death is final. These people knew that. They were not some sort of fantasy cult. They knew that Jesus had died. And yet, what they couldn't believe, what was so hard to believe, was that restoration of Jesus' life was possible. And that indeed it had already happened. A film made in 2002, the Magdalene sisters told the sad story of the Maggies of Ireland. They got that nickname from Mary Magdalene, a revealing story in itself. The Gospels mention only one fact of Mary Magdalene's past, that Jesus had driven 7 demons from her. Nevertheless, a tradition grew that Mary Magdalene must have been the same woman as the prostitute who washed Jesus' feet with her hair. Hence, when a strict order of nuns agreed to take in young women who had become pregnant out of wedlock, they labeled the fallen girls Maggies. The Maggies came to public attention in the 1990s when the order sold its convent, bringing to light the existence of the graves of 133 Maggies who had spent their lives working as virtual slaves in the convent laundry. The media soon scouted out a dozen such Magdalene laundries across Ireland. The last one closed in 1996, and soon relatives and survivors were spilling accounts of the slave labor conditions inside. Thousands of young women spent time in the laundry, sometimes being put there just for being temptresses, forced to work unpaid and in silence as a form of atonement for their sins. The nuns took away illegitimate children born to these women to be raised in other religious institutions. A public outcry erupted, and eventually campaigners raised money for a memorial, a bench in St. Stephen's Green, a park in downtown Dublin. This writer determined to visit the memorial on a trip to Ireland. It was a gray day in Dublin with sharp September wind and the threat of rain in the air. He asked the policeman and a park guide about the memorial to the Maggies. He says, they both looked at me quizzically. Dunno that one, sorry. One by one, my wife and I examined the bronze statues and impressive fountains, mostly honoring fighters for Irish independence. Only by accident did we stumble across a modest bench beside a magnolia tree. The couple was sitting on it, but behind their backs you could see the brass-colored lettering. We asked if the couple would mind moving aside for a moment so we could read the inscription. The plaque reads, "To the women who worked in the Magdalene laundry institutions and to the children born to some members of those communities, reflect here on their lives." Walking away from the humble memorial, I found myself reflecting not simply upon their lives, but also now the sharp contrast between how Jesus treated moral failures and how we, his followers, often do. Jesus appointed the Samaritan woman to be his first missionary. He defended the woman who anointed him with expensive perfume. Wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will be told in memory of her, he said. And Mary Magdalene, she of the 7 demons, he honored as the very first witness of the resurrection. A testimony at first discounted by his more prestigious followers. Where we shame, he knows. It's interesting, we who follow in the wake of the resurrection don't remember one of the basic R's. He restores. It doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how pure a life you've led or how impure your life has become. He restores you and me. If you think you're clean, I guarantee there's a spot somewhere. And that spot taints you as much as the most soiled article in all the world. Jesus, through his resurrection, gives us the power to be restored. All of us. Doesn't matter how old, doesn't matter how young, doesn't matter how many things you've done wrong, how many things you've done right, we all stand in need of his restoration. So let's quit putting one another down and just lift him up and let him draw all to him. Restoration. It's one of those basic things. And then there's the retelling. I think it's really interesting the way Mark tells the story. Because what Mark says is that they were so disjointed by what they came to anticipate, what they thought would be there, and what they were shown, what was really there. They were so perplexed by what had happened, and so overcome by the message that the angel had given them to say, that they just ran away afraid. I don't know exactly when it was that one of them said to one of the disciples, "You know, that tomb is empty." And there was an angel there that said, "Jesus is alive." I don't know who it was that made the first statement to the first other person. But gradually, the notion began to form that maybe this tomb was empty for a reason. And for a reason beyond any calculation, a reason beyond any rationale we can provide, a reason that comes from God's own hand. His power manifest in the world. His power manifest in the life of His Son, who was crucified and now lives again. The retelling. John Ortberg tells a story of a friend of his who used to work as a denominational official in Minnesota. One of his jobs was to travel to little rural communities where they didn't have churches to do funerals. He would go out with the undertaker, and they would drive together in the undertaker's hearse. One time, they were on their way back from the funeral, and my friend, John, he says, was feeling quite tired. He decided he would take a nap. Since they were in a hearse, he thought, well, I'll just lie down in the back of the hearse. Sounds kind of like a creepy thing to do, but it's a true story. The guy who was driving the hearse pulled into a service station because he was running low on gas. The service station attendant was filling up the tank. He was kind of freaked out because there was a body stretched out in the back of a hearse. While he was filling up the tank, John woke up, opened his eyes, knocked on the window, and waved at the attendant. John said he never saw anybody run so fast. When people see life, where they're expecting death, they start running. On the third day, everything changed. Where everybody thought they were going to see death, there was life. And that shook things up. After the third day, as a matter of historical record, his followers, who were shattered, disillusioned, and heartsick following the crucifixion, went out to face all kinds of difficulties and suffering and imprisonment and to spread the word, because they believed they had seen life where they were expecting death. That shakes people up. I don't know exactly where it is in your life, but I suspect for every one of us, there's a place in our life that has experienced some form of death. I experienced, through the death of my mother, a kind of a death. A death of memory, a death of some sense of legacy, even though she left a great one. What helps me is the hope. What helps me is the fact that those women who ran scared out of their minds from an empty tomb because they were expecting death and found life had truly found life. What helps me and what helps you in every place in which death enters our life is the fact of Jesus' resurrection. have an infirmity, some weakness, something that just bugs you and won't go away, Jesus will bring new life. You have some sin that you just can't seem to conquer. You just can't seem to get over. You just keep returning back to it time and time and time again. Jesus can restore that. Do you have some sorrow? Something that has wounded you and kept you down, and you're not certain you'll ever get over it. Jesus resurrects life. Jesus restores life. Jesus gives us the opportunity to bear witness to that life restored, not only in the early disciples, not only in the empty tomb, but also in our lives, restored and resurrected. And so now, go and tell the story. Share Easter, not on Easter Day only, but on every day.